He laughed at me, my own grandson, right there in front of his friends. He said, "You're useless, Grandpa. You're broke. You should have retired to a nursing home years ago." They all laughed with him, like it was a joke worth telling. I just stood there, holding the tools I once used to build this house, the same house he lives in now. I didn't argue, didn't raise my voice. I simply nodded, because when you've lived long enough, you learn that silence can be the loudest answer. A month later, when the lawyer opened my will, that same laughter died right in his throat. "Hello there, my friend. I'm glad you're here with me today." Sometimes the hardest stories to tell are the ones that come from the people we love most. I've lived long enough to know that respect fades fast when people think you have nothing left to offer. Tell me in the comments, has anyone ever dismissed you because of your age? I'd like to know I'm not the only one who's felt that sting. My family has always looked picture perfect from the outside. People in town used to call us the kind of family that had it all together. My son, Daniel, runs a successful contracting business. The same one I started 40 years ago with nothing but a rusted pickup and a hammer. His wife Claire is polite in public, always smiling, always speaking softly, but when the doors close, she makes it clear that she believes I'm part of the past, a burden they carry out of obligation. And then there's my grandson, Liam, the boy I once carried on my shoulders through muddy fields, the one who used to fall asleep in my arms after long fishing trips. He's 21 now, proud, loud, and full of the kind of arrogance youth gives when it hasn't yet been tested by life. From the outside, people would say we're close. They'd see Daniel and Liam mowing the lawn for me and think, what a good family. They'd see us sitting together on the porch on Sundays and believe we were bound by love and respect. But they didn't see the small looks exchanged when I spoke too slowly, the sighs when I asked a question twice, or the way Claire would roll her eyes when I reached for my wallet to pay for something. They didn't see Liam's smirk when I talked about how things used to be. I'd catch it sometimes, that subtle twist of his mouth, like he couldn't wait for me to stop talking. Inside the house, the tone was different. The laughter you heard outside didn't reach the kitchen. There, the air was thick with impatience. Daniel often said, "Dad, times have changed, you wouldn't understand." Every time I offered advice, I'd nod, letting him believe he was right, because sometimes letting people feel wise is the only peace you get. But deep down, I could feel the distance growing. Liam began to act more like his father than the boy I once knew. He'd come in with his friends, loud and confident, barely noticing me sitting in the corner reading the newspaper. He used to run to me when he scraped his knee, and now he walked past me like I was furniture. Our neighbors still waved and smiled, unaware of what brewed behind closed doors. They'd say things like, "You're lucky, George. Your family takes such good care of you." And I'd smile back, because what else could I do? Nobody wants to hear that the people you love most can make you feel invisible. My wife, God rest her soul, used to be the glue that held this family together. When she passed away, I thought we'd grow closer, that shared grief would soften us, but it didn't. It hardened them. Without her warmth, this house turned cold. I still cooked dinner sometimes, out of habit. I'd set an extra plate as if she might walk through the door. Liam would grab his food and head to his room, headphones in, music blaring. Daniel and Claire would eat quickly, their eyes glued to their phones, their minds elsewhere. It was like we lived in the same house, but in different worlds. I wasn't angry at them, not yet. I just felt forgotten, as if my time had expired in their eyes. People think betrayal comes suddenly, but it doesn't. It starts in small moments. A joke made at your expense, a favor left undone, a birthday forgotten, and before you know it, those little moments pile up until love turns into something you can't recognize. On the outside, we still looked like a proud family, but underneath, the cracks were already there, deep and widening, waiting for one cruel laugh to shatter everything for good. When I look back at my life, I can't help but think about the years I spent building everything my family now takes for granted. The house we live in wasn't bought, it was built. Every board, every nail, every shingle on that roof was set by my hands. I remember standing on that muddy land the first time I saw it, just a patch of soil with nothing on it but weeds and hope. My wife and I saved every penny we could, eating beans for weeks so we could buy one more piece of lumber. I worked through rain, through back pain, through winters that froze my fingers, just to make sure my son would have a place that felt like home. When Daniel was young, I used to take him to the workshop every morning before school. I wanted him to learn what real work looked like. He'd sweep sawdust, hold nails, and ask questions about everything. "Dad," he once said, "when I grow up, I want to be just like you." I believed him. That memory used to make me proud. Now it just hurts. Because the man he became treats the work that built his life like it's worthless. He drives past the old shop every day, but he hasn't stepped inside in years. That workshop still stands behind the house, small, weathered, with a faded sign that reads Carter & Son Construction. I never took that sign down, even when the business became his. I thought one day he might come out there, sweep the dust, hang a new sign with his own son beside him. But that day never came. The lights have been off for years, the tools lined up in silence, waiting for hands that no longer care to use them. Sometimes, late at night, I still go in there. The smell of sawdust and old oil lingers in the air. It reminds me of who I was and what I gave up. You see, everything I owned, I poured into that business. I mortgaged this house twice to keep it running through the hard years. When Daniel went to college, I sold my truck to help pay for his tuition. When Liam was born, I built the crib myself and set it beside their bed because they couldn't afford one yet. Every piece of wood in this house carries a story of sacrifice, but to them, it's just furniture. They walk past it like it grew here on its own. There's one thing in this house that means more to me than anything: the dining table in the living room. I carved it with my own hands on the week Liam was born. I used the finest oak I could find, shaped every leg, and sanded it smooth. That table was where we celebrated birthdays, Christmas dinners, and late-night talks with coffee and pie. It was the heart of this home. But now, it's just a place for takeout boxes and unpaid bills. No one sits there anymore. It's funny how something built to bring people together can end up reminding you how far apart you've become. When my wife got sick, that table was where she sat while I fed her soup. She'd smile and say, "Promise me you'll keep this family close." I promised her, but I failed. After she passed, Daniel stopped coming home as often. Claire said it was too painful for him, but I knew better. He didn't want the responsibility of being reminded where he came from. And Liam? He just grew up in a world where everything was already waiting for him. He never had to build, fix, or struggle. Maybe that's why he doesn't value any of it. Still, I kept working long after I should have stopped. I told them I was saving for retirement, but I wasn't. I was building security for them. I invested in properties, small businesses, and land across town. Quietly, carefully, I made sure our name meant something. Every deed, every document I kept hidden in a locked drawer in my study. No one ever asked about it, because they all assumed I had nothing left. That's the part that stings most. Not the words, but the blindness. They saw an old man in worn clothes and forgot that I was the one who gave them their start. That house, that workshop, that table, they're more than wood and nails. They're my life's work. And now they're symbols of everything my family has forgotten. They think they've outgrown me. But what they don't realize is that they're standing on the foundation I built. And soon enough, they'll be reminded of that truth, not by my words, but by what I've left behind. It started small, as most betrayals do. One Sunday afternoon, Daniel invited a few business associates over for lunch. The house was full of chatter and polite laughter, the kind people use when they're trying to impress each other. I stayed quiet, helping set the table, proud to see my son speaking with such confidence. When one of the men asked about the company's early days, I smiled, ready to share a story. But before I could speak, Daniel said, "Oh, that was back when my dad was doing things the old-fashioned way. We've come a long way since then." They laughed. It wasn't cruel laughter, but it stung just the same. I looked down at the table I built, pretending I didn't notice. That was the first time I felt invisible in my own home. Later that evening, Liam came home with two of his college friends. They walked in loud, smelling of cheap beer and arrogance. I was sitting in the living room reading the newspaper when Liam said, "Hey, Grandpa, tell them about the time you fixed that old truck with duct tape." He's a legend for making broken junk run for another week." His friends laughed, and one said, "Man, that's some real redneck engineering." They thought it was funny. I tried to smile, but inside I felt something crack. They didn't see pride in my stories anymore. They saw a relic, a man too old to matter. I wanted to correct him, to remind him that the truck he drives now came from the same hands he mocks. But I didn't. I folded the paper, set it on the table, and said quietly, "Glad to see you've got friends, Liam." He barely looked up. "Yeah, Grandpa? Don't wait up, we're heading out." And just like that, he was gone again, leaving his laughter echoing down the hall. When the door shut, the silence settled heavy. I sat there staring at the headlines but not reading a word. My chest tightened in that quiet way it does when you're hurt but too proud to show it. My wife used to say, "Don't take it to heart, George. They're young." But youth doesn't excuse cruelty. I've always believed respect has nothing to do with age, it has to do with character. That night, I walked into my study and looked at the locked drawer where my will sat. It wasn't anger I felt, just clarity. I ran my hand over the wooden desk, the same one I built 40 years ago, and thought, they think I've got nothing left. Let them think that. I turned off the light and went to bed, but I remembered every word they said, every laugh, every look. Because sometimes the smallest wound is the one that never heals, and in that wound, a plan begins to grow. After that night, things only got worse. The little jabs turned into something sharper, something that no longer hid behind jokes. One evening at dinner, Claire made a comment that burned more than she realized. The family was gathered around the table, and she said, "Dad, maybe it's time you let go of the old place. It's too big for you now. We could sell it and put you somewhere comfortable." Daniel nodded along, adding, "Yeah, we'd take care of everything. Scrap it, don't you worry." The way he said it made it clear that comfortable meant out of sight. I looked at the table between us, the same one I carved with my own hands, and said, "This house isn't too big for me. It just feels empty without respect." The silence that followed was louder than shouting. A week later, I overheard Liam talking on the phone in the kitchen. He didn't know I was standing by the door. "Yeah, man, once Grandpa's gone, Dad says we'll probably sell the property and split the cash. The land's worth a fortune." He laughed, not realizing that every word landed like a nail in my chest. I thought about all the mornings I stood in those fields, breaking my back to make this land what it is. And now, to him, it was nothing but a price tag. I stepped away before he saw me, because if he had, he might have seen the truth in my eyes, that my silence wasn't weakness anymore, it was warning. Then came the moment that sealed everything. One afternoon, Daniel asked me to sign a few papers. He said they were routine business updates for the company. I sat at my desk, glasses perched on my nose, scanning the documents. My hands may be old, but my mind is sharp. The fine print was clear. The papers would give him control over the last remaining shares of the business still under my name. I looked up at him and said, "Routine, huh?" He hesitated, forced a smile, and said, "It's just easier for everyone if the assets are streamlined." I pushed the papers back to him and said, "Nothing about my life has ever been easy for everyone else, Daniel, and it won't start now." His face flushed, and for the first time he realized I wasn't as fragile as he thought. The distance between us grew after that. Meals became shorter, conversations colder. Liam stopped greeting me altogether. He'd bring friends around and use the living room like it was his. They'd sit on my couch, feet up, music blaring, while I stayed in the kitchen, pretending to read. One night, I heard him say, "Grandpa's got nothing left. He's just holding on to make us feel guilty." His friends laughed, and I felt the blood drain from my face. I leaned against the counter, breathing slowly, forcing myself not to walk in there and speak my mind. Instead, I stayed silent, watching the reflection of their laughter in the dark kitchen window. That was the moment I knew the line had been crossed. The boy I loved was gone, replaced by something cold and greedy. The son I trusted had turned into a man who saw me as an obstacle. But I didn't confront them. I didn't shout or argue. Instead, I went to my study that night, unlocked the drawer, and looked over every paper, every signature, every detail of the will I had written years ago. They thought they were tightening their grip on what I owned. What they didn't know was that every time they pushed me, I tightened mine. I closed the drawer, locked it again, and smiled for the first time in a long time. Let them keep testing me. They'd soon learn that a man who built his life from nothing never truly loses control of it. It was around that time that I started to notice things weren't just disrespectful, they were deliberate. Papers on my desk would be slightly moved. Envelopes I hadn't opened yet would be sealed again, like someone had read them and tried to hide it. My bank statements began arriving later than usual, and when they did, they came already opened. At first, I told myself it was the post office, or maybe just my old hands forgetting where I'd left things. But deep down, I knew better. One afternoon, I went into my study to find Daniel sitting at my desk, my will folder lying open beside him. He looked up too quickly when I walked in and said, "Just looking for some old tax files, Dad." I stared at the papers, then at him and said, "Tax files don't come with my name written in ink at the top." He smiled stiffly and muttered something about helping me stay organized before leaving the room. I sat down, ran my fingers along the folder and thought, so this is what it's come to. A few days later, I went to the bank to check my accounts. The teller recognized me and said, "Mr. Carter, we've had a few calls from your family about transferring some funds. We didn't proceed without your approval, of course." I thanked her politely, but my hands shook as I walked back to the truck. Calls from my family. Transfers. They weren't waiting for me to pass. They were trying to empty me before I was even gone. That night, I decided to test them. I left a single envelope on my desk marked property titles. Inside, I placed nothing but a blank sheet of paper. The next morning, it was gone. When I asked Daniel if he'd seen it, he said, "Maybe you misplaced it. You've been forgetting things lately." The lie came so easily it chilled me. That was when I realized I wasn't imagining it. They were already circling like vultures. I started keeping notes. Every strange sound at night, every document moved, every whisper I caught from down the hallway. Once, I heard Claire on the phone in the kitchen saying, "Once everything's in Daniel's name, we can finally breathe." The way she said it made my stomach twist. I stepped back quietly before she noticed me. From that day, I stopped leaving anything out in the open. The will, the deeds, the savings account details, all of it went into a locked safe behind the old cabinet in my workshop. No one knew it existed but me. Still, I kept up appearances. I let them believe I was growing weaker, slower, more forgetful. Every time Liam made a snide comment, every time Daniel spoke to me like I was an inconvenience, I nodded, smiled, and let them feel comfortable in their deceit. Because there's one thing they'd forgotten about me. Before I built this house, before I ran a company, I was a man who paid attention. And I had started paying attention again. But something deeper was still gnawing at me. I couldn't prove how far they'd gone. I needed evidence, something undeniable. That's when I remembered the security cameras I'd installed years ago after a break-in. They were old, but still working, quiet, forgotten, and always recording. As I stood there in my study that night, I looked up at the small black dome in the corner and felt something I hadn't felt in years: control. I didn't know exactly what I would find yet, but I knew one thing for sure. The truth always has a way of showing itself, especially when someone thinks no one's watching. The night I found the proof, it was almost by accident. I'd gone into the workshop to fix a loose hinge on the back door, but really I just needed a place to think. The old security system was still running quietly, tucked away behind the cabinet where I'd left it years ago. I opened the small monitor, and to my surprise, the camera feeds were still recording. I clicked through the saved files, half expecting nothing but dust and shadows. But then I saw it. There they were, Daniel and Claire standing in my study while I was at the doctor's. Liam leaning over my desk, flipping through my will. Daniel's voice was low but clear enough for the microphone. "Once he signs the amendment, the house and the land are ours. We'll sell the workshop first, then the rest. He's too old to fight it." Claire whispered back, "What if he refuses?" Daniel replied, "Then we'll move him out one way or another. He won't even notice the papers he's signing." My stomach turned as I listened. Liam smirked in the corner, tapping on his phone, saying, "Finally, this old place will pay off. Grandpa should be thanking us for keeping it." The casual cruelty of it cut deeper than any insult. I leaned closer to the monitor, watching my own family carve me up like a deal on a spreadsheet. I didn't react. I didn't call them out. I didn't even tell the lawyer yet. Instead, I sat back in that creaking chair and let the truth sink in. All these years of sacrifice, all the nights of working until my hands bled, and the only thing they saw was something to take. They thought they were clever. They thought my silence meant blindness. They didn't know my cameras had been watching longer than their greed had been growing. I saved the recordings, labeled them carefully, and tucked them into a folder inside the safe. Next to it, I placed my true will, the one no one but the lawyer and I knew existed. Every asset, every property, every dollar directed away from the people plotting against me. I added one last note to the folder, to be revealed only upon my death. When I locked the safe and turned off the light, I felt something shift inside me. Not rage, not sadness, certainty. They thought the old man was too tired to notice. They thought they could steal from me before I left this world. But I'd already decided they would learn the lesson my wife always spoke of. Never mock the hands that built your future. I walked back into the house, greeted them with a calm nod, and poured myself a cup of tea. They smiled at me, thinking they were still in control. I smiled back, thinking of the folder in my safe. And for the first time in months, I felt at peace. Now I want to ask you something, my friend. Imagine you just found out what I did. The people you fed, raised, and loved were plotting to take everything from you while smiling in your face. Would you have spoken up right away and confronted them? Or would you have stayed silent and waited for the right moment like I did? Tell me in the comments. I truly want to know what you'd have done in my place. It all came to a head at Sunday dinner. The whole family was there. Daniel, Claire, and Liam, sitting at the same table I built with my own hands. The food was good, the conversation fake, and the air heavy with things unsaid. Halfway through the meal, Daniel cleared his throat and said, "Dad, we've been thinking. The house is too much for you. It's time we move you somewhere more suitable." I set my fork down and asked, "Suitable for who?" He forced a smile and said, "For you, of course. We'll handle the paperwork and make sure everything's taken care of." Claire nodded quickly, adding, "It's for your own comfort, George. You shouldn't have to worry about property and bills at your age." And then Liam, bold and arrogant, leaned back in his chair and said, "Yeah, Grandpa, let Dad handle it. You've done enough. Relax. You can't take it with you anyway." The words were sharp, the smirk on his face even sharper. I looked at them one by one, and instead of anger, I felt a strange calm. I picked up my glass, took a sip, and said, "You're right. You can't take it with you. That's why I made sure it goes exactly where it belongs." They didn't understand what I meant, not yet. I could see confusion flicker in Daniel's eyes. He tried to laugh it off, saying, "Don't be stubborn, Dad. Let's make this easy." I smiled faintly. "I don't do easy, son. Never have." I folded my napkin, stood up, and said, "You enjoy your dinner. I've lost my appetite." Then I walked out, slow and steady, while their voices tangled behind me. Questions, frustration, disbelief. I didn't answer a single one. They thought they had cornered me. They thought this would be the night I finally gave in and signed my life away. But I had already signed something else. Something they'd soon see with their own eyes. I went to my study afterward, closed the door, and sat quietly. I could hear the muffled argument between Daniel and Claire through the walls. Liam's laughter followed, careless and cruel. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't break anything. I just sat there and stared at the folder on my desk, the one marked, "To be read upon my death." Every line of that document was written with the steadiness they mistook for weakness. Let them think they'd won. Let them plan their victory. Because when the truth came out, their own greed would be the thing that undid them. A few weeks after that dinner, Daniel got a letter from my lawyer. I knew because I saw the envelope sitting on the kitchen counter, unopened but already wrinkled from his grip. His name was printed neatly on the front, and I could tell just by his expression that he didn't like seeing it. He waited until I left the room before opening it, but I heard the paper tear anyway. Inside was a short note, nothing more than a polite reminder of a clause I'd added to my estate. All property transfers or financial decisions made in my name without my consent are legally void. When I came back in, his face was pale. "What's this supposed to mean, Dad?" he asked. I shrugged and said, "Just something to keep things fair." Claire tried to laugh it off, saying, You really think anyone's trying to take advantage of you? Her tone was light, but her eyes darted toward Daniel's. Liam sat nearby, pretending to scroll through his phone, but I could see the flicker of tension cross his face too. They all knew the message was for them. I didn't explain it further. I just smiled and poured myself another cup of coffee. That small letter wasn't my final move, it was just a reminder. A whisper that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't as helpless as they believed. It rattled them, I could see it. Daniel became quieter after that, careful around me. Claire watched what she said. Even Liam, for all his arrogance, stopped making jokes when I was around. They didn't know how much I already knew. They didn't know I'd heard their plans, seen their greed, or locked away proof of it all. The letter was just a pebble in the water, small but rippling through their confidence. And as I watched them shift uncomfortably in their own home, I realized they were beginning to feel what I'd felt for months. Fear, uncertainty, and the weight of consequences creeping closer. I said nothing more about it. I went about my days as usual, watering the plants, walking the yard, visiting my lawyer once a week. They thought the old man was losing track of things. What they didn't know was that I was keeping score, and every quiet step I took brought me closer to the day when silence would speak louder than any of their excuses. The day everything came to light was quiet, calm, almost peaceful. My lawyer called family to his office a week ere I passed, just as I'd instructed. They came dressed in black, faces solemn, but their eyes told a different story. Daniel looked impatient, tapping his foot. Claire clutched her purse like she was already counting what would be inside it. And Liam, the one who once called me useless and broke, sat in the corner grinning, certain his payday had finally arrived. The lawyer, Mr. Davis, opened the folder I'd prepared years ago and began to read. Mr. George Carter leaves his entire estate to those who showed him respect, loyalty, and love. He paused, glancing at them. The specific beneficiaries are listed in the attached pages. Daniel leaned forward eagerly, but as the lawyer continued, the color drained from his face. The house, the land, the workshop, the investments, all were left to charities, old friends, and 2 employees who had stood by me through the hardest years. Claire's mouth dropped open. Liam frowned, confused, waiting for his name. It never came. Then Mr. Davis reached for a smaller envelope marked "to be played." He clicked a button, and my voice filled the room. If you're hearing this, it means I'm gone. I didn't leave you out of my will because I stopped loving you. I left you out because you stopped respecting me. You tried to take what wasn't yours while I was still alive. You lied, plotted, and laughed at the hands that built your world. They froze. Liam's jaw tightened. Daniel's eyes darted toward the lawyer. And then the recording continued. Everything you said in my study, everything you signed behind my back, it's all here. The screen lit up with footage from the security camera, the same moment they thought was private. Daniel's voice echoed through the room. Once he signs the amendment, the house and land are ours. Claire gasped. Liam buried his face in his hands. By the time the recording ended, the silence was unbearable. The lawyer cleared his throat and said quietly, "There's one last clause, Mr. Carter's request. All unauthorized attempts to access or sell his property are to be legally contested in full. I've already filed the paperwork." Daniel tried to protest, but his words stumbled over guilt and shock. And that was how it ended. Their greed became their undoing, not because I fought them with anger, but because I fought them with truth. They thought they could outsmart an old man. They forgot the man who built this life had been watching all along. I didn't need revenge. I only needed them to face what they'd become. And that day, they did. The room went dead silent. You could hear the weight of the truth settle over them like dust after a storm. Daniel stared at the screen, pale and motionless, his hand gripping the edge of the table as if holding on could undo what he'd just heard. Claire covered her mouth, tears forming, not from grief, but from shame. Liam sat frozen, his confidence gone, his eyes darting around the room as though searching for a way to escape what he'd done. No one spoke. The lawyer didn't need to say another word. The papers, the recording, and my voice had done what arguments never could. Justice doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers, and in that whisper, everything becomes sealer. Mr. Davis closed the folder gently and said, "Mr. Carter wanted this day not to be about punishment, but understanding. That was the kind of man I tried to be until the end, firm but fair. The truth stood on its own now, and there was no denying it. When they finally walked out of that office, no one looked at each other. The power they once held in their laughter was gone. What remained was silence, heavy and deserved. For the first time in a long time, order had returned, not through anger, but through truth. And though I wasn't there to see it, I imagine the air felt cleaner, lighter, free of lies at last. If there's one thing life has taught me, it's that respect means more than money, and truth lasts longer than inheritance. You can build a house out of wood and stone, but what keeps it standing is loyalty and gratitude. The moment you forget where you came from, you start losing who you are. I never wanted revenge. I just wanted them to remember that everything they stand on was once built by hands that loved them. So if you still have someone who raised you, guided you, or believed in you, show them kindness while you still can. Because time always reveals what's real. And by then, it's often too late to fix what pride destroyed. Thank you for listening to my story, my friend. It means more than you know. Every time someone listens with an open heart, it reminds me that truth still matters, that there are people who understand the value of respect and love. Tell me in the comments, what would you have done if your own family treated you the way mine did? Would you have stayed silent or spoken out? I'd truly like to hear your thoughts. If this story touched you, please share it with someone who might need a reminder that dignity and honesty never go out of style. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. Until next time, stay strong, stay wise, stay blessed.